When Roman legions shattered Queen Zenobia's forces outside Antioch in the year 272 CE, her generals expected the usual Roman conclusion: a blade, a scaffold, a clean final end. What they witnessed instead was something far more precise. Rome did not always kill its enemies. Sometimes it kept them alive long enough to make a point. The empire had refined a method of domination that went beyond execution. Defiant rulers were not merely defeated, they were transformed into symbols, living evidence of Roman supremacy. For women who wore crowns, capture meant exposure to a cruelty designed not simply to punish, but to dismantle identity itself. Roman conquest did not end on the battlefield. It continued through law. Under Roman legal theory, defeat erased personhood. The principle known as ius gentium, that is, the law of nations, held that once an enemy was conquered, free people ceased to exist as legal subjects. They became property, not metaphorically, literally. A captured queen held no more legal standing than the lowest infantryman dragged from the field in chains. Roman citizens lived behind a wall of legal protections. Flogging a citizen was scandalous. Executing one without trial provoked outrage. But none of those limits applied beyond Rome's borders. Foreign captives possessed no rights the empire was obligated to respect. They could be imprisoned, displayed, sold, abused, or killed, entirely at the discretion of their captors. Nobility did not matter. Gender did not matter. Rome's earliest legal code, the 12 Tables, laid this groundwork centuries earlier. Prisoners of war belonged to the Roman state or to the soldiers who captured them. Royal lineage offered no shield once chains replaced crowns. The historian Tacitus acknowledged this reality with cold clarity. When describing conquered British elites, Rome, he noted, showed no hesitation in violating those who had once governed others. For female captives, the danger multiplied. Roman military culture treated conquered women as spoils. While a small number of the elite prisoners might be spared immediate abuse for political reasons, the distinction between prisoner and slave rarely survived contact with the army. On paper, status remained. In practice, defeat dissolved it. This was not chaos, it was policy. Nowhere was that policy more visible than in the Roman triumph. A triumph was not a parade, it was a ritualized psychological assault. When the Senate granted a general the right to celebrate one, Rome prepared for a display of dominance that would move slowly through the city, like a warning. The route stretched from the Field of Mars and through the Forum and up to the Capitoline Hill, forcing spectators to witness victory from every angle. The procession followed strict choreography. Musicians led the way. Then came painted scenes of conquered cities, models of foreign lands, exotic animals dragged from distant territories. Each element reminded Rome's citizens how far their power extended. At the center walked the prisoners. Captured rulers were placed at the front, deliberately visible. Their royal clothing was often left intact. The contrast was essential. A queen in chains spoke louder than any speech. It told Rome's enemies that resistance ended here, that no throne stood beyond reach. For captive women of royal blood, the triumph was an endurance test. Hours of slow marching. Thousands of eyes, jeers, silence, applause. The crowd's pleasure came from watching dignity stripped away in public. The uncertainty was part of the punishment. Some prisoners survived the day. Others vanished before nightfall. Every step forced them to imagine both outcomes. Zenobia of Palmyra was perhaps the most striking example Rome ever displayed. She had built an empire stretching from Egypt to Anatolia. For years, she ruled the East in defiance of Roman authority. When Emperor Aurelian finally defeated her and captured her while she fled toward Persia, he recognized her value instantly. Zenobia was not just a prisoner. She was a message. During Aurelian's triumph in the year 274 CE, Zenobia appeared transformed into spectacle. Ancient sources describe her adorned with jewels that caught the sunlight. Her body turned into a moving exhibit of Eastern wealth. But it was the chains that defined the moment. They were gold, not iron, not bronze. Massive golden chains so heavy that guards walked beside her to help support their weight. The symbolism was unmistakable. The wealth she once commanded had become the instrument of her humiliation. Her body itself was repurposed as propaganda. Accounts suggest Zenobia carried herself with composure. She did not beg. She did not collapse. That restraint may have saved her. Aurelian spared her execution, possibly impressed, possibly calculating that her survival served Rome better than her death. She was granted a villa near Rome, allowed to live, possibly married into Roman aristocracy. Her daughters married well. Whether this was mercy or a subtler imprisonment remains unclear. Zenobia lived on as a permanent reminder that even the greatest queens could be absorbed, neutralized, and domesticated by Rome. Not all women were granted that fate. In Britain, the destruction was far more direct. When King Prasutagus of the Iceni died in the year 60 CE, he attempted a compromise. His will left half his kingdom to Emperor Nero, and half to his daughters, hoping to preserve his family status. Roman officials ignored it entirely. They seized everything: land, property, authority. When Queen Boudica protested, Rome responded with deliberate humiliation. Tacitus records what followed with rare bluntness. Boudica was publicly flogged. The act itself was significant. Corporal punishment was tightly regulated for Roman citizens. To flog a queen of an allied kingdom was not discipline, it was degradation. Then the soldiers violated her daughters. Tacitus describes it sparingly, but the meaning is clear. The girls were assaulted by legionaries, likely in full view of their people. This was not uncontrolled brutality. It was calculated terror. By destroying the royal family publicly, Roman officials sent a message to the Iceni about the cost of resistance. The strategy failed. Rather than submitting, Boudica rose. She raised an army and burned 3 Roman cities, including Londinium. Tens of thousands died. Tacitus preserves a speech in which Boudica declares, "She fights not as a queen defending territory, but as a woman avenging her violated body and her children." The rebellion was crushed. Roman discipline prevailed. Tacitus claims Boudica poisoned herself. To avoid capture, her daughters disappear from the record entirely. Their story ends. Where Rome chose silence, for those captured alive, the triumph was often only a prelude. As processions reached the Capitoline Hill, some prisoners were led away toward the Mamertine prison, also known as the Tullianum. Built into the rock beneath Rome, it was where enemies of the state were erased quietly. While celebrations continued above, the prison's lower chamber could only be reached through a hole in the ceiling. Darkness, filth, suffocation, starvation. Execution methods varied, but the intent did not. Rome killed its most famous enemies out of sight, preserving the illusion of civilized order. Vercingetorix, who had united Gaul against Caesar, was held for 6 years. Before being paraded and executed, Jugurtha of Numidia starved to death in the Tullianum after losing his sanity. Simon Bar Giora was displayed in Titus's triumph before execution confirmed the end of Jerusalem's resistance. Only after messengers reported the prisoner's death did celebrations officially conclude. Not every captive ruler died. Some were more useful alive, but survival itself became another form of punishment. Living monuments, controlled reminders. The treatment of captured queens exposes the machinery of Roman power. Law protected citizens and abandoned everyone else. Nobility dissolved at the moment of defeat. Humiliation was not accidental. It was engineered. The chains, the flogging, the public violations, the executions. These were not excesses. They were tools. The stone walls of the Mamertine prison still stand today. They remind us that Rome's triumphs were built on carefully managed cruelty. Queens who once commanded armies were reduced to spectacle. Their suffering transformed into reassurance for an empire that ruled through fear as much as force. Rome did not just conquer territories, it conquered dignity, and it made sure everyone was watching.